A man puts on a rubber mask, walks across a university campus. Within seconds, crows start screaming, diving, circling, following him block after block, scolding him the entire way. Here's the strange part. Most of these crows were not even born the last time that mask meant anything. The man wearing it has never trapped them, never hurt them, never even met them before, and they're attacking him anyway. Nearly 2 decades earlier, a scientist named John Marzluff put on this exact same mask and used it to briefly capture and tag a handful of wild crows on this campus. Those original crows are almost all dead now, and the mask is still hated, passed down, taught, remembered by birds who never lived through the original event at all. Today, we're going inside one of the strangest, longest-running experiments in animal behavior, and what it reveals about a memory system inside a bird's brain that scientists once assumed was impossible. In 2006, wildlife biologist John Marzluff at the University of Washington wanted to answer a simple question. Could wild crows actually recognize individual human faces, not just humans in general? One specific person, distinguishable from every other person walking past. To test it, Marzluff and his students put on a rubber caveman mask, walked around campus, and briefly trapped and tagged 7 wild crows before releasing them, unharmed. That mask became known in the study as the dangerous face. A second mask, worn by researchers who simply walked by without bothering any crows at all, became the neutral face. Same basic idea. No threat attached to it whatsoever. Then Marzluff's team started walking the same routes, over and over, sometimes in the dangerous mask, sometimes in the neutral one, watching how the local crows reacted. If the mask meant nothing to them, the birds should react the same way to both. They didn't. Every single time a researcher wore the dangerous mask, crows scolded, dive-bombed, and followed them. Every time they wore the neutral mask, nothing happened at all. The crows weren't reacting to a person. They were reacting to a specific face. This alone would have been remarkable, but Marzluff's team wanted to know something even stranger. How long would that memory actually last? So they kept the experiment running, year after year. The same dangerous mask, worn periodically, walked along the same paths across campus. 2 years passed. The crows still scolded the mask. 5 years. Still scolded. 8 years, according to Marzluff. And crows were still reacting to a face tied to an event most of them had never personally experienced. Here's what made this genuinely bizarre. Individual crows typically live somewhere between 7 and 8 years in the wild, sometimes longer. By the later years of the study, many of the original 7 trapped crows had almost certainly died, and the mask was still hated. By 2023, 17 years after the very first crow was ever trapped, researchers walked the same routes one final time, and the reaction had, for the very first time, gone quiet. No scolding, no mobbing. 17 years, almost precisely matching the outer edge of a wild crow's natural lifespan, was roughly how long it took for the memory to finally fade out of the population entirely. If the original crows were dying off years before the reaction finally stopped, something else had to be happening. The memory wasn't just being stored, it was being taught. Marzluff's team documented something remarkable during the study. Crows that had personally been trapped by the dangerous mask learned to fear it directly through their own experience. But crows that had only watched the trapping unfold, circling and calling overhead as the mob gathered, learned to fear the same mask too, simply by observing. And then it went one step further. Young crows, hatched years after the original trapping, who had never personally witnessed anything happen at all, began scolding the dangerous mask on their own, having apparently learned it directly from their parents. On one later walk in the dangerous mask, Marzluff was scolded by 47 out of 53 crows he passed. Far more birds than had ever even been present at the original trapping back in 2006. The information wasn't staying contained to a handful of individual birds. It was spreading through direct experience, through observation, through parents teaching offspring, an entire local crow population, updating and maintaining a shared generational memory of exactly which human face meant danger. At this point, Marzluff's team wanted to know something even more specific. Not just whether crows remembered faces, what was physically happening inside their brains when they did. In a follow-up study, researchers captured crows, exposed them briefly to either the dangerous mask or a separate carrying mask associated with being fed rather than trapped, then used brain imaging to see which regions activated. The results were striking. When crows saw the dangerous face, brain scans showed activation in regions functionally similar to the amygdala, the same part of the mammalian brain responsible for processing fear and forming emotional memories. Marzluff described these findings plainly. The regions of the crow brain working together during this response were not unlike the regions that work together in mammals, including humans, suspected to exist in birds for years, but never actually documented until this study. Later research went further still, identifying a brain structure in corvids called the nidopallium caudolaterale. Functionally similar to the prefrontal cortex in mammals, the region humans rely on heavily for decision-making, planning, and social memory. Corvid neuron density, researchers found, ranks among the highest of any vertebrate of comparable size, a brain roughly the size of a walnut, running processes strikingly similar to systems found in the human brain, built specifically for recognizing threats, storing that information long-term, and passing it on to others. If this research is genuinely changing how you look at the crows in your own neighborhood, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this kind of story reach more people. So why would evolution favor a brain built specifically to hold on to grudges this precisely and pass them down for years? Crows live almost entirely surrounded by humans, especially in urban and suburban environments. Some humans feed them, some ignore them completely, and occasionally, a human represents a genuine, direct threat, an animal that can accurately sort humans into these categories. And remember that sorting long-term gains a serious survival advantage. Avoiding a specific dangerous individual, rather than treating every human as equally risky or equally safe, is a far more efficient strategy. And the ability to teach that information socially, spreading it through a flock rather than requiring every single bird to learn it firsthand, multiplies that advantage enormously. One dangerous encounter experienced by a handful of birds can end up protecting an entire local population for years, long after the birds who lived through the original event are gone. Researchers studying this describe it less as a single crow holding a personal vendetta and more as something closer to institutional memory. Information stored not in any one individual, but distributed across an entire flock, continuously refreshed generation after generation. A living, evolving map of which specific humans are safe and which ones aren't. Scientists studying this behavior are careful about one specific word, grudge. Calling it a grudge imports a very human idea: resentment, remembered injury, something close to a personal vendetta. What the data actually shows is narrower and in some ways more remarkable. A bird generalizing from one specific bad experience into a lasting, shareable identification of a single individual. The intent behind that word, grudge, is ours. Not necessarily the crow's, but strip away the human framing, and what remains is still extraordinary. A wild animal, with a brain a fraction the size of ours, capable of recognizing one specific human face out of thousands, storing that recognition for years, transmitting it socially to offspring who never witnessed the original event, and physically activating brain structures functionally similar to our own fear and memory systems while doing it. Not folklore, not exaggeration. 17 years of carefully documented fieldwork on a university campus, hiding in plain sight the entire time. So the next time a crow on your street seems to be staring at you a little too closely, remember what might actually be happening behind those dark eyes. Somewhere in that small brain may be a stored specific memory of you, of whether you've been kind, indifferent, or dangerous. Information that bird may carry for years, information that bird may eventually pass down to chicks who will recognize your face before they've ever met you themselves. If this story changed the way you'll look at the next crow you see, subscribe to Birdhearts so you never miss the next hidden mystery in the bird world. And tell me in the comments, do you think a crow in your own neighborhood might already recognize your face? I'll see you in the next one.